Skyway to Doom. Has the ghost of an American construction worker put a curse on the Sunshine Skyway Bridge? That was a theory put forward by a Florida fisherman after nearly 60 people died in 4 separate shipping disasters at the Tampa Bay Bridge during the first 5 months in 1980. In January, 23 Coast Guards were killed when their cutter collided with an oil tanker. The following month, a freighter smashed into one of the main bridge supports, and 10 days later, a tanker ran out of control and slammed into the main span. But the worst accident to hit the Jinx Bridge came on May 9th. Possibly blinded by the wind-lashed rain of a violent storm, the skipper of a 10,000-ton Liberian freighter, Summit Venture, misjudged his approach to the bridge. Instead of passing under the middle of it, the ship plowed into one of the main supports, and a huge section of the road running over it collapsed. Cars, trucks, and a Greyhound bus plunged 150 feet into the water. 32 people died, and 23 of those were on that bus. Other drivers missed death by mere inches, slamming on their brakes just in time as the yawning gap opened up in front of them. The Florida House of Representatives stood for a moment's silence as the news of the tragedy reached them during the meeting. One member blamed the Tampa Bay Harbor pilot system, called for an inquiry. But a local fisherman, 27-year-old Charlie Williams, said later, "When the bridge was being built, a construction worker fell into some wet concrete. He's still there in the structure, and the Skyway has been cursed ever since." The bridge, which is 4 miles long, was opened in September 1954, and more than 40 people have committed suicide by leaping from it. A steer called Murder. The Old West had its share of ghost stories, but none is stranger than the tale of a steer branded Murder. From 1890 to 1920, cowhands shuddered over the legend. The story began in 1890 in Brewster County, Texas, where the brothers Zach and Gil Spencer were rounding up longhorn cattle. Two had always been close, but tempers frayed in the hectic roundup. Suddenly there's a dispute between them over a handsome steer with an enormous spread of horns. "We'd draw straws for him," Gil suggested. "Better yet are guns," Zach roared, whipping a 6-gun out of his holster and shooting his younger brother dead. When his temper abated, Zach was grief-stricken. He sadly lifted his brother's body and placed it tenderly over the back of a horse. A thoughtless cowhand asked him how the steer should be branded now. "With the same kind of brand that's on my hide," Zach sobbed. "Brand him Murder, cut him loose, and I hope to God he haunts the mesa for 1,000 years." He buried his brother that afternoon, then killed himself. A few months later, the branded steer began to appear in widely separate parts of the countryside. Amazingly, many who had even had a passing glimpse of him were fated to kill or be killed. The cowboy saw him and told his 2 best friends about it. They accused him of lying. He shot them both. Hours after sighting Maverick steer, a small rancher killed his brother-in-law in a family argument. The runaway boy lost all desire to be a gunman when he met the steer on a lonely trail. In the nearest cow town, he tried to surrender his guns to the marshal, but tragically, the marshal misinterpreted the gesture and shot him down. It was believed that the steer died and become a ghost whose restless hoofs were taking it across all the borders. Physical description had changed too. The steer was now a bull. Lon Allen, a Montana rancher, said in 1920, "The brand across him looked big and red, not healed up all the way as it ought to be. Not haired over at all, looked as raw and cruel in the moonlight as on the day they burned it onto the critter. Allen had been a partner with his friend Cole Farrell in a small spread next to Fay Dow's D Down Ranch. Dow wanted the land, and one night called on Allen when he knew Farrell was in town. He managed to convince Allen that his friend was making love to his girl. Crazed with jealousy, Allen crouched in a midnight ambush with a 6-gun in his hand. At the sound of hoofbeats on the trail, he braced himself to kill, but the thing that blundered into the moonlight wasn't Cole Farrell's horse, as the bull branded murder. In a wild panic, Allen sent 4 bullets crashing into the creature's skull. The apparition looked at him sadly and drifted away. Fay Dow heard the shots and gleefully rushed to the scene as the plot became evident, and there was a shootout in which Allen was wounded and Dow died with 2 bullets in him. In a strange trial that followed, Allen took the stand in his own defense and in defense of the bull. It is true, he said, he'd seen the phantom, killed a man moments later, but his partner was riding towards the ranch. If it hadn't been for the bull, he would have killed the wrong man. The jury took 10 minutes to acquit Allen. The ghostly bull with the scarlet brand faded into history, for no one ever saw him again. The Skulls of Calgarth. Wealthy Miles Phillipson owned huge tracts of picturesque English Lake District countryside around Windermere during the 16th century. But he was never ever satisfied with the extent of his empire, always restlessly seeking new acres to add to his estates. He had the small farm of Craster and Dorothy Cook, which overlooked the lake. He decided their humble plot of land would be ideal for the new luxurious mansion he planned. The farm was all the Cooks had in the world, and they were not prepared to sell when Phillipson made his offer. But he was not a man to take no for an answer. He invited the poor couple to share Christmas dinner with him and his family. The Cooks were awed by the foods and wines and overjoyed when the landowner said they could keep a golden bowl they admired. The next morning, soldiers hammered at the door of their home and arrested them. For a week they were held in separate cells with no idea why they were being imprisoned. Only when they arrived in court did they learn of their crime, stealing a golden bowl from Miles Phillipson. The verdict was foregone conclusion because the magistrate hearing the case was Phillipson himself. When he sentenced them both to death, Dorothy Cook cried out, "Look out for yourself. You will never prosper. The time will come when you will own no land. You will never be rid of us." Phillipson was not worried by the threats. The couple were hustled to the gallows and strung up to die. Within days, Phillipson had acquired their land and started work on his magnificent new home called Calgarth Hall. When it was finished, he held a lavish Christmas feast to celebrate. Friends and neighbors joined him around the table, making merry with no expense spared. Then a terrifying scream sent them rushing upstairs, swords at the ready. Phillipson's wife stood halfway up the staircase, shuddering as she stared transfixed at a hideous sight on the banister. 2 grinning skulls. The landowner seized them, threw them into the courtyard, and swore revenge on whoever perpetrated the tasteless joke. But his threats failed to put the minds of his guests at rest. Several shuffled off to bed early, only to be woken in the small hours by more screams. The skulls were back on the stairs. Over the next few days, Phillipson tried everything he knew to get rid of them, but each time they were thrown outside or buried, the skulls returned to haunt the home. Christmas was ruined. And as the news spread, so was Phillipson. His business declined, his riches dwindled. When he died, a broken man, his beautiful home rang all night with the demonic laughter of the skulls. The two gruesome relics continue to visit the hall, giving the landowner's heirs no rest. They appeared each Christmas Day and on the anniversary of the cook's execution. Only when the family became too poor to maintain Calgarth and were forced to sell it did the skulls leave the building in peace. Thanks for sitting around and humoring an old fox and his tales. If you'd like more, please hit like and subscribe. And remember, nothing is more frightening than a fear you cannot name.